doing this. Yeah. Not only is it an hour of your time, but we were both on an hour too early, Dicken and I. Technology, right? So welcome everybody who's joining us and people who are going to listen in the future. I got a lot of interest in coming to listen to Dicken and ask some questions at the end. And how do I introduce Dicken? I mean, I've gotten so much from you, Dicken, through the years that I wouldn't know where to begin with that. But I can say that I just recently found out that Dicken's first career was as a teacher. And I loved hearing how that's how he learned about rapport, because he worked with really difficult kids who loved him, right? And so they became better students as a result. And actually, my first career was also as a teacher, an art teacher. And we could talk about that at some point. But the bulk of Dicken's years has been as a psychologist, because he went from teacher to psychologist, really, one just melded into the other. And he wrote a book. Oh, I meant to bring it here. It's in the other room because I wanted to show it. It was a beautiful front cover called Coming Home. And many of you on the call have read it. And Dicken's also been in a long-term marriage. He's had, 52 years. So, that speaks volumes right there. And the main reason that I do these interviews, and I kind of fall in love with them, it gives me an opportunity to ask questions that I may not have gotten to ask people in other places, at conferences or wherever. But it all started because I noticed that my clients who would read or listen to Sid Banks, they flew. They just really, I didn't have to meet with them very long. That's what would happen. And so that kind of morphed into what I call mystery school. And we have people like Alan. It was so great that Dicken and Alan were talking a little bit before we got on. They've not seen each other for, I won't tell you how many years. So, without any further ado, the main thing is, Dicken, I just want you to talk about whatever lights you up lately. But, especially for me, I'll start out with the first question and then we'll do questions at the end again. But I'm really curious how you ran across it to begin with, and how did you get turned on by what he was saying? Because it took me a lot longer. And what it took for me was people like you, Dicken, who had doctorates, and you being a psychologist made me pay attention more to the fact that what Sid was talking about is really meaningful and helpful in the field of psychology as well as business. I know that you've worked with a lot of people in business. So anyway, I'm sending it over to you. Welcome.
No, thank you, Lori. That was very sweet. I'm really touched. Wow. I don't know. What really gets me going are the holidays. I think the original meaning of all the holidays arose out of people in deep quiet and beautiful feelings and saying, we got to celebrate this. So the celebrations are most often around light or Thanksgiving, gratitude. So, just those two alone. It's a very deep spiritual teaching that every one of us has that divine light within us. And like sometimes I'll talk about it's a flame. And the Hasidic masters would say the purpose in life is to fan that flame until you burst into flame and dance as a light to the world. Right? That's found in many, many spiritual teachings. Light has been used as a metaphor for consciousness, where we lighten up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So let me share something I've seen lately, just about in the meeting of Sydney Banks. I was a searcher. Before I met Sydney Banks, I had been working 10 years as a psychologist. I read voraciously everything in bookstores that was in the spirituality section and in the psychology section. I was interested in developing myself so I could be a better person, a better husband, a better father. That in particular, I had 2 kids. In other words, I wanted to have more love in my life. And so by the time I met Sydney Banks, I was meditating 4 hours a day. I was doing affirmations. I had a notebook for that. I had a notebook where I wrote down what I was thinking during the day so I could later work on it and reframe it. I had many techniques for expressing emotion and trying to get out these uncomfortable feelings. That was very big back when I became a psychologist. Expressive therapies.
Yeah.
I did them all. I was a real searcher. I had trained myself to wake up at the end of REM sleep so that I could write down each of my 5 dreams during the night in very full length, and then I had to work on those. Right? And the prevailing notion in psychology was we have traumatic events in our life and we lose our well-being if we ever had it at all. And the best we can do is work hard over years using techniques and programs to try and develop our well-being. Okay, time to meet Sid. He threw a wrench in the works, so to speak. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. The long and the short of it was after I met him, I couldn't do any of the things I had been trained to do for all those years. I had to start over, literally start over, because I had it backwards. So here's what happened when I heard there was a man who was enlightened, and I read books about enlightened people, and I studied with meditation masters in Hindu tradition, Buddhist tradition, Christian tradition, Judaic tradition, would go on retreats, would travel around to study with these teachers. So here's another teacher. And he was talking about the connection between spirituality and psychology. So he really had my interest because I was trying to bring those 2 worlds together for a very long time. Unsuccessfully, might I say. So I traveled from Vermont, where I was living on one side of the U.S., flew across the country to California, where Sid was giving a public talk. And I sat in the audience with many other people. And I have to tell you, when I had a chance to meet Sid before the talk started, and I remember being struck by his eyes. You know, being a dad and having held babies for hours, he had that look of wide open presence, as quiet as can be. I thought I was pretty quiet, but when I was around Sid, I felt like I was going 9,000 miles an hour in comparison. Just his presence. And he started talking, and he often would say, don't even bother thinking about what I'm saying because it won't help you. Just listen. Don't try and figure this out. No one can figure out what I'm trying to point people toward. And it's right there within you, and it's always been there. So just listen. And he just talked. And I tell you, after about 20 minutes, if you sent a search party into my head to try and find a thought, I don't think you could find one. It was like, what's happening? I mean, Sid often talked about what you're looking for. If you want to find your well-being, what you're looking for is a state of no thought. Well, without realizing it then, I dropped into the state of no thought. And it's an essential part of his teaching that if you find the quiet that's within you underneath the noise of your babbling thought system, when we become really present, there'll be silence. You'll feel wide awake and aware. And there'll be a feeling, the feeling of being deeply connected to life. Perhaps the best word for that would be love, but it takes many different shapes. So here I am. I've just met this guy and he's talking, and within 20 minutes, I am standing in a space that I had been looking for my whole life. Why do you think I read all those books and tried hard? I wanted to experience being fully alive and full of love so that I could be a better husband, a better parent, enjoy life more. I got a glimpse, as Sid would say. I got a glimpse that just for a few moments I went completely beyond my intellect into the present moment. Now, Sid would say, as ordinary as can be if you experience this. As a matter of fact, it's my sense that every one of you every day experience this and you don't realize it. How can I say that? Well, in order to fall asleep every night, you have to be willing at some point to let go of everything you're thinking. And right away, that starts feeling good. As soon as we let go of everything we're thinking, it feels good. The feeling of surrender is a beautiful feeling in itself. It's the feeling of relaxation. When we fall asleep, it's not a technique. We're just letting go of everything we're thinking, and our physical body relaxes. And pretty soon we're going, oh, God, it feels so good to get in bed, turn off the light, just relax. Yeah, we can blame it on the bed, right? just before we fall into sleep, there's a state that's wide awake still. You're not asleep, deeply relaxed, filled with a beautiful feeling. It's right there in everybody. It's within. It's always been there. So what's our problem? If it's that simple, and Sid would say over and over again, you're a thought away from your well-being, you don't realize it. No one can think their way to well-being, it's impossible. If I'm with my wife thinking, I will not feel love. As a matter of fact, if I'm doing a lot of thinking, which I did, and at times still do, if I do a lot of thinking, I don't feel close to what's around me. So here's the formula. A lot of thinking, don't feel connected. Very little thinking, less and less, you feel more and more connected. A lot of thinking, you have the primary feeling of having a lot of thinking, which is what Sid called our ego. He says, you know what ego is? Everything you think. Because it creates a feeling of separation. Separation from others, not connected. Separation from this deeper love and wisdom. The sense of that, creates the sense of duality. Sense of being separate. If I go for a walk in the woods and I'm doing a lot of thinking, I tell you I will not experience beauty. And when I fall out of my thinking, I can't help it. I see beauty everywhere. I'm overcome by how beautiful things are. So here I am sitting, first time listening to Sid Banks. And inexplicably, I start experience this state of silence, wide awake, alive, and feeling this. When the talk was over, I had fallen into a love that was unconditional because I looked around and every single person I just felt like connected to. I felt warmly about. I felt kind-hearted about. Even the people that were wedded to their thinking and caught up and obviously struggling, I just had compassion for them. Without trying, without doing anything. Just being in a space. Sometimes people say that's dropping from your head into your heart. Sid would say if you have insights into the principles, it's only valuable if it leads you into this space where you experience more love and more understanding. Just a few little quotes from Sid that later helped me realize what had happened and began to see why that was so helpful for me in my life to have that experience. Because right when we would hit that space, and pretty much the majority of people in the room were in that space, you would see couples sitting together, and always at that point, you'd see them start holding hands. You'd see arms going up over each other. You'd see couples looking at each other with that look they had when they fell in love. Because they literally had fallen into a love that was not personal. We call it divine love. You can see why mystics say God is this. God is love. Here's a few quotes just to he said, get to know yourself. Now he's talking about this self that's always here, not your thinking that comes and goes, not your feelings that come and go. When we drop out of all of our thinking, we all step into a space of presence, awake, alive. I've seen no exceptions to this. I've traveled the world. I've worked with people in prison and living on the streets, the homeless. I've worked with people who are really tormented, the business executives. I've worked with people all over the world, all different ages. We all get caught up in thought and have a lot of thinking and feel this sense of disconnection. It says the primary feeling of ego is fear or insecurity. And fear turns into fight or flight for human beings. So people withdraw or they get pushy. Fear and aggression are just two sides of the same coin. Two faces of ego, if you will. Get to know yourself. You will get more and more into yourself, this space. So it says if you have insights in the principles, it will lead you to a quiet meditative state, characterized by what we call the three principles: creative potential, awareness, deeper feelings of oneness, connection, and in those feelings, a knowing that guides us through life, and a knowing not of the intellect, wisdom, a formless intelligence that's been guiding us at different times through our lives without us realizing that's what was going on. Get to know yourself. You will get more and more into yourself. You will begin to experience the feeling of love. This feeling of love and no thought, quiet mind, no thought. He said it doesn't mean you don't have thoughts. You're just not paying attention to a single thought when you're fully present. They're just flowing through in the background. They don't mean anything. They're all neutral. Every thought is neutral until we grab onto it, think about it, give meaning to it, act on it. This feeling of love and no thought are coupled together like lovers. Perhaps my favorite quote of Sid Banks. There's a spiritual teaching that's Tantric. It talks about the marriage of the physical and the spiritual, the marriage of male and female, the marriage of opposites. You go beyond concepts, you touch a space that resolves opposites. This feeling of love and no thought are coupled together like lovers. Gather up all your forces and retreat inwardly. What you're looking for is a quiet mind. You probably said that 10 million times. From there you will see everything is love. That makes no sense to the intellect, but we can get experiential glimpse of being at one with people. I get really quiet and I walk into nature and I feel an intimacy with trees. Literally, I feel an intimacy with flowers. Like they're family in the best sense, friends, best friends. Remember the simple formula: more thinking, less connected; more fear, more upset; less thinking, more present; deeper Sid says, if you can take one little step beyond your precious thought system and touch this space, something beautiful must come into you. So when Sid said, in truth, all of you are connected to the infinite field of life energy, like a wave is connected to the ocean. You're not separate. You're connected to the intelligence behind all of life. So he'd say no one is more spiritual or wiser than you. That would be like saying to a wave, no other wave is more ocean than you are. Isn't that beautiful? But then when he said, here I am, a psychologist, working so hard to develop well-being in myself and others, and he said, you already have perfect well-being inside of you. Perfect. Nothing to be developed. Just uncovered, because it can get covered over by us getting caught up in a lot of thinking and then starting to think that what we think is true, and then starting to identify in, and those thoughts and beliefs and those feelings are who I am in truth. And that's suffering. That's how he described psychological suffering, creating the illusion that we're separate from well-being and wisdom, that we don't have it, so we then search for it on the outside. Money, food, sex. Maybe when I do this and I can feel good, so I must be getting closer to what I'm looking for, so I'll do more of that. He goes, as you begin to accept yourself, the happier you become. The happier you become, the more you want to get deeper into the self. It is a journey of love because it leads to pure love. The reason I'm as excited about talking about the principles as I was when I had this experience the first time I met Sid is that I know it's our birthright. I know it's already within and available to every human being, no matter how long you've been caught up in the nightmare of separation, you can wake up to truth. That in truth, we're not separate from the universe. Never have been, never will be. Do you know what the scientists, they're catching on. They're sounding like mystics. Research study recently out of NASA, North American Space Agency, some of the top scientists in the United States from all over the world came to the conclusion in their study, they said, we've been studying the energy in our universe. And we've taken everything that has form, anything that can be seen with instrumentation, like telescopes and subatomic microscopes, anything that can find form so we can measure the energy of that. They said if you take everything in the universe from the smallest subatomic particles to the largest suns in the universe, put them all together, it only accounts for 4% of the energy in the universe. And the rest is what they call dark energy or dark matter, which has no form. So this is what Sid was saying to us. You think your thoughts and feelings are who you are. Well, it is in part 4%. And he said, but in my experience, I realized this field of energy that we're living in and that's living us is infinite. So 4% and 96% is a metaphor for truth. It's actually a teeny percentage of who we are and what life is the physical world. We're spiritual beings in truth. Now, you don't even have to agree. Sid didn't care whether you agreed with any idea or opinion. That's any idea or opinion is never truth. He says, you want to find truth, you're a thought away from it. You just have to be willing to let go of everything you're thinking and go beyond your words and my words and beliefs, your own and others, concepts, your own and others, ideas, your own and others, beyond the intellect just for a moment to find out what lies beyond the computer, beyond the intellect. He said, just take one step. That's all it takes. He said, don't get greedy. I had 4 seconds. You get a nanosecond, it'll change your life. When I started to realize that under the constant and chronic thinking and analyzing I was doing in my life was this field of wide open presence, a space, our soul, the psyche and psychology, soul. We touch that space and it's connected to the whole. And the feeling of that connection is love, because it's total. It includes everything. So it says there's a different kind of love you discover inside. It's not conditional. You fall into a love for the whole world, right? So you fall in love with trees and you have compassion for people who are caught up in their thinking and don't know that's the source of their suffering. This illusion of disconnect. So it started my journey. That's how my journey started, and that's how I would love people to just have a glimpse of what lies here always when we're not engaged in any thinking. Presence, no thought. Just thinking is free to come and go and flow. One time Sid saw me in a low mood, caught up in my thinking, and he could pretty much tell by my body language that I thought what I was thinking was true. I don't get this. I don't know what's wrong with me. Other people seem so smart. I mean, you could just fill in the blanks. This is my insecure thinking. Remember, ego is fear. And he comes up to me and sits quietly and he sort of looks over at me and smiles and says, Dicken, don't you know when you feel this way, you can just ignore what you're thinking? I was doing the opposite, giving all my attention to what I was thinking, consumed in my thinking, caught up. I was so caught up in my thinking by the time I met Sid, the more education I got, the more I had to think about. I mean, God, there were 450 theories in psychology and different approaches. And I was trying to make sense out of all of those. somehow tie them together, and I couldn't do it. It's just the battle of opposites. And Sid says, what I'm presenting to you is not a theory. I'm talking about forces in life that create from formless into form. It's the mystery of life, is that out of nothing, everything arises. Out of the quantum field, energy dances into condensed form, takes form as matter, takes form as humans, take form as feelings. It's an inside-out paradigm. It doesn't work outside in. Things in the world can't create feelings in you. The traffic has no power to create, right? The weather doesn't create your feelings. Your situations don't create your feelings. And the good news is, if we want to find our well-being, we're a thought away. When we disengage, it's like we tell our kids, you've had enough screen time. Put the screen down. Step away from your computer. You were never meant to live in it. You can utilize it wisely. You can visit. You can Google shit because it's really fun and at times extremely helpful. You can play around with memories, so you can say to someone, I'll meet you for lunch tomorrow. And how cool is that we can create time and we can utilize those concepts to our benefit. But the instant we misuse our computer or get too wedded to it, there's tension, stress, or upset. There's this feeling, there's this contraction. And with understanding, you realize, oh, that's just thought. And Sid says, if you really see thought, you let go of everything you're thinking. That's how you know if you've really seen that it's thought. And it'll bring you right back to the now. It'll bring you right back to happiness. That's another quote from Sid. I've been working with a suicidal teenager, as a matter of fact, several. This has been a hard time for kids. Hard time. Not just kids, but certainly it's taken a toll on a lot of teenagers. Just get off on your own and start doing a lot of thinking. And if you're like me when I was that age, you have a lot of insecure thinking. And then you get more and more involved in it. It seems more and more true. Then the suffering increases. So what a honor to be able to talk to kids about this. Say you're not what you think. You're no different than anybody. When you fall out of your thinking, you too have a heart, and that light from within will start shining out through your eyes. You'll lighten up. And then kids experience that when I have less thinking, I lighten up. When I have more thinking, I get very serious and heavy. And then if I get really involved in that thinking, it'll start seeming true, and then I'll really suffer. Sid says that's the only source of suffering. Here I was a psychologist, and we had a book this big of diagnoses for people. And Sid says there's really only one. People get caught up in a thought and a belief and think it's true. He said if they didn't think it was true, then it would be just thoughts flowing through you, like babies have thoughts flowing through them. They have all kinds of feelings, but they're not grabbing onto any concepts. Not yet. That comes soon enough. Oh, I want to be sure we have time for people to say something or ask a question. I will stop I'm just saying there's an absolute space of absolute vastness and beauty and love within each of us, each of you. And that's always been true. And that you don't have to take anybody's word for it. You can see just the simple awareness of how much thinking you're doing. And when you have less, you'll feel better. When you have more, you can get very weighed down. Just notice. Just notice the fact of thought, the feeling that goes with that. Okay, Laurie, shall we?
Wow, Dicken. Every time I hear you, I just get more and more mesmerized by what you have to say. I loved how you started out with the light of this time of year and how it's so beautiful and spiritual and
It is. I love
connect.
coming back because I meditate on the beauty of the light within people. And I think that's what's really the cause of celebration, whether you're doing Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or Christmas or whatever celebration. Since the earliest days, people have celebrated life as the life-giving, necessary force for life to exist.
Absolutely. And your quotes, I mean, I read all of Sid's books more than once, and I don't remember half of those
I had
quotes.
to go back through some stuff that never got published and old tapes. And
Wow.
one time is I can send it. I compiled all the quotes I could find that Sid made about love.
Oh, wow.
And I have other compilations of my favorite quotes from Sid's, but I come back to very often from these. It's just 3 pages long, but
Wow. Yeah,
yeah.
it's wonderful. And yes, I want to leave time for questions. So just raise your hand, either visually or I can't see everybody on the screen at the same time, though. I'll just keep scrolling. Or, the little hand in the reaction button on the bottom. And just unmute yourself and ask away.
I have a question.
Sure.
This Dale Walsh. I was diagnosed with schizophrenia 46 years ago, and now I'm trying to start a business for the families of those affected by schizophrenia. And I understand the I get the concept and I feel the concept of the silence and the wisdom within, but how can you stop that cycle of reaction of when you have a loved one who is diagnosed and and they're having paranoid delusions or whatever, and you get caught up in their delusions, and it's just an unending cycle. And and even if you can access that point of wisdom, how do you get your loved one to the same place?
Well, I've had very little luck trying to get my loved ones to do anything. I don't know. I tried that for years and years. And I found out that in any relationship, if one person gets healthier, it's already a healthier relationship. What do I mean by that? As we get healthier, our minds get quieter, and we have more of these deeper, beautiful feelings. And Sid would say, look within, find a quiet in a feeling, and when you find a nice feeling, give it away. Don't keep it to yourself. Give it away. It was given to you unconditionally. Give it away generously and unconditionally. And so when I started doing that in my family, Dale, early on, I had to stop thinking about what they were doing and believing and not believing and thinking. And as Sid would recommend, get quiet, look within, find this space. Keep listening to people. Keep listening to Sid is my recommendation until when you listen to him, you find yourself getting quiet. And then stop listening to Sid because he would say it's never been me. It's I'm pointing you toward that space within yourself. And if you look there, you'll find what people all over the world have found, a more peaceful space, a more loving space, a space where we can enjoy things that we do. And when you find those feelings, that's how it changed my parenting overnight when I realized that I stopped bringing my dissatisfaction and upset to my kids. And when I would get upset with them, I would wait and quiet down and wait until I was in a better feeling. And then I would go and just bring that to them. Just doing that, our relationship, all of my relationships that I did that with got better. And it's logical, isn't it? You don't ever make a relationship better by complaining to people on a regular basis. You bring warmth and kindness to them and stop demanding that they be different so you can feel good.
Right.
Right?
I'm basically a novice in this whole 3P thing, but
Me too, Dale. Hey, Dale, we stay novices, which means this is not something that can be understood intellectually. And we keep learning more and more.
I'm just thinking of like a client who say this, say the child is like saying like very vicious things, and to the parent, and and the parent can't help but I mean it seems to me like virtually impossible for the parent to like reach that point of silence and quiet when the person that they most love in the world, who they feel they've lost to this illness, is like attacking them. And that's the dilemma I'm always coming up against in my coaching business.
Yeah. Boy, Dale, I never know what to tell other people because I know that when anybody quiets down, they find their own answers and they're the ones that work best. So advice doesn't usually work very well.
Right.
Right. So, Dale, if you're helping people in your coaching practice, number one thing you want to do is become really present when you work with your clients. Right? Drop in. It's what Sid called the health of the helper. Right? We can only help people by what state of mind we're in. So we drop into that space and then just keep it ordinary. Share what you've learned that's helpful to you.
Right.
That's all we can do. That's all we can do. That's what Sid encouraged us to do when we asked him your question, because we asked the same question as Sid. Say, okay, Sid, what about this, and what about this, and how should we deal with this? And people don't get this, and then they suffer. And then he would say, look within. It's a feeling. And then share what you know from that feeling. Keep it simple, keep it ordinary. And that's how we can point people toward that.
As my I Ching says, face these times with a Buddha-like calm.
Well, I don't always have a Buddha-like calm, but at least I now know where to look for it.
Right.
Right? Because even with clients, I can get caught up in my thinking, and then I start feeling that I'm trying hard to help them. And then the feeling is so helpful. It can wake me up to the fact that I'm thinking, brings me back to the now. I come back into not knowing, and then there's a not knowing and a feeling, and then things occur to me to say that are just simple and point people back in that direction.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Joe. Oh, you're welcome. That's a great question. Thank you. Anybody else have something they'd like to share or ask?
Hi, Dicken. Anna.
Anna, hi. I thought you were getting ready to say something.
Well, it's not. If I'm happy to, if someone has a question, I'm happy to wait. But it was more of a share. Yesterday, I happened to. I was in the patio, and I know how much you love nature. And this little bird just came and stood in the water fountain, which is like a plate, and then he stayed really quiet, and I was really surprised. And I stayed with him, watching him, and then I move along, and then he sat down, and then he started just drinking water and keep quiet. And a few minutes later, he just passed away. Right there and there.
Wow.
And it was being in the presence of truth. It was just, that's just, it's still so beautiful that something had left. And I just had that, I don't have words for it. So I just wanted to share that.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And that's an absolutely beautiful story. And it says it's not just a story about the bird, but it's a story about where you're experiencing that from in yourself. Because you saw the beauty of it. I've been with people who are dying where I'm in my head, and it's very painful. Death does not seem beautiful. I've also had experiences with family and close friends of being extremely quiet and in that feeling space. And death then is the most sacred because it doesn't feel like an ending. It's the wave on the ocean goes from being this way down to this way, but nothing got lost. Now you literally experience, you have insights about eternal life and the way the person is still with you, literally. But that makes no sense to the intellect, but I can tell by how you experience that as a beautiful sacred event. It's just natural in life.
It was the attitude, because at first I started drinking and then it started shifting into it, and then it was like it was leaning in with such a peacefulness.
Yeah.
And we were around, and it was almost like it didn't care that we were there. That's when I realized that something else was going on. And then it was just gone, but it was just so still. There was a stillness through the process. And it's just, I don't know. My daughter was with me, and I think it was a beautiful lesson for her as well. So
yeah, beautiful. Yeah. And it's so nice your daughter could have been with you when you had that kind of experience.
Yeah.
Because that's teaching her about the beautiful naturalness of these cycles of anything that takes form comes and goes. But there's something that's always here that doesn't come and go. And it's not a matter of saying those things to kids, but when we're in that quiet space, it's a lesson taught to our kids, right? That's beautiful. Wow, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Alan had his.
Oh, hi. Dickens, this is so much fun. I can't stand it. Thank you. I haven't thought about this before, but when I was a kid, up till the time I became a teenager, I was in my heart all the time. In nature, in life, my eyes were wide open. Everything felt wonderful. And then I hit my teen years, right? And all the way up through college, I became a head guy. I became a thinking, insecure head guy. And then I met Sid in 78, I guess. And all of a sudden, my heart was opened up again. And ever since that time, my life has been a blend of head and heart. I'm a grant writer now, so I have a lot of head stuff.
Yeah.
But I also so appreciate times like this where it's possible to touch that heart space again. So, thank you.
Oh, boy. That balance, Alan, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's not a matter of throwing away the computer. It's a matter of recognizing how to use that wisely. But the computer can't recognize how to use itself wisely. So when we get quiet, we begin to know when thinking conceptually is helpful. And Sid says you get really good then at going back and forth between those two worlds. But the computer was never meant for love or wisdom or to make important decisions. And yet most of us, when we get insecure, try to figure out the answer. So when I said I had it backwards, Sid would say when we get quiet, there's a feeling, and that the answers you're looking for arise out of that feeling. So he'd say love is always, always the answer. So if you have a problem or a difficulty and you get quiet, there's a feeling, and when you live in that feeling, it guides you through your life beautifully. It knows how to utilize the intellect wisely. I had someone write to me 2 days ago and said, I have a big decision and there's something that just doesn't feel right, and you said love is always the answer, and I'm getting quiet and nothing is coming. You see, because we have expectations for what should come. So when we have no expectations, when people get quiet, universally, I see people start to feel better. And then they say, I don't get an answer. Well, okay, you're at peace. You're enjoying life. You feel connected to people in life. And you say you didn't get your answer. The answer sometimes comes in the form of a new thought or new idea, but it can come in all different ways. But it's a feeling. Sid would say it over and over again. It's a feeling. He said, if you're listening to one of my talks in the car, and while you're listening, you get really quiet, and there's a beautiful feeling, take the tape out or the CD out or take it out, roll your window down, throw it out the window. He said, you found what you're looking for, and it was never on the tape. Do you know when they did a research study of 600 top business executives in the United States and pressed them with this question? What do you most want in life? What do you most want? You know what the highest answer was? Peace of mind. And yet, working in companies for 16 years, people would lose their peace of mind and then try and figure out the answers to these huge business problems and make mistakes and not communicate well and struggle and think it was extremely difficult. and we'd come in and remind them of how their minds really work. And as they got quiet, they'd get into a nicer feeling, and immediately the communication would change, the listening would change. Less thinking, more connected, better listening, better capacity to learn and have new and fresh thinking. It's always true. It's the logic of the psyche, psychological, as Sid would say. He thought that was so funny. But we do find a balance between the intellect and wisdom, and you can tell by the feeling when you're in balance and when you're out of balance. And when you're out of balance, it's only by letting go of everything we're thinking that we get back in balance. And most adults, when they're having difficulty, you'll watch, they don't think less, they think more. And that's why life seems like such a struggle at times, and so difficult and so painful.
You're reminding me of what Sid said about harmonizing universal mind with our little mind, big mind with little mind.
Yes, yes. He says if you have enough understanding, you get out of the way, and then wisdom lives us and takes the lead, and it knows how to guide us through any problem, any difficulty. And that's living in harmony with life, because that's how nature operates. So it's quite a vision. It's quite a vision, and he just was mostly interested in saying psychological experience is only 4% of who we are. I've come to help remind you that when you go beyond your intellect, there's this whole other world that feels open and vast and precious and alive and full of feeling. Now, to me, he said, you put those all together, that's what people often call God. If they have a notion of this loving, all connecting one God, that's we can experience that dimension, get little glimpses. It's such a beautiful vision for all of us. We already have what we're looking for, and when we wake up to it, it's right here. So.
Wow, this has just been so beautiful. What a great way to really start this holiday season. Thank you so much, Dicken, for spending time with us.
Oh, you're welcome, Laurie. You're a delight. I love what you're doing, Laurie, and how you're keeping this conversation alive and pointing people toward this simple truth that Sid stumbled across and has been life-changing.
It's hard not to share what we have, right? What we've been so fortunate to stumble upon. So thank you to everyone who joined today, and have a wonderful holiday.
Yeah, thanks everybody. It's good to see some really familiar faces. Wish I had more time to say hello to everybody, but please know I'm saying that now, and enjoy this time of light.
Yeah. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.